We are in a financial situation precipitated by what is occurring with the government lockdown in the United States that must get itself resolved very quickly. It is costing this particular country that I'm in, which is the USA, billions of dollars. And if it should financially fall back down when it has just gotten back up, it could fall far enough that this could influence every single country within hours and affect their economies as well in a very, very negative and strong impact. So what, as light workers around the world, can we do about this? The government lockdown is the first place to begin. What is really behind it is something that we discussed, and I believe it could be in the very first online course we had, which is the Science of Immortality. But we discussed the artificial clans, artificial life forms and the clans that they have. And at that time, we discussed, for example, that there was one with China, the hub of it, and North Korea, as well as North Vietnam, and 10 Arab nations. We spoke about the fact that there is a group of artificial intelligence beings that has infiltrated these nations and wields this secret government. In their case, it's multiple in terms of that. It's also economic. But they have wielded the plan of global takeover in a very slow way. The others are more familiar, those who feed off the public and feed off their energy like vampires. And these are the ones that we know of as the Illuminati, but that is really not an accurate name, and it's a very small subset of it. But they're very old, ancient European families with family bloodlines all the way across Europe and into Eastern Europe. The conflict that took place between these two groups, which we mentioned in those courses as being one of, I believe, 6 or 7 groups of what I called AI, artificial intelligence. Of these, there is also one that we knew as the Nazis, or the Anazi in the ancient tongue. And they stand also for one of these groups. The Aryan, the Aryan, and Anazi are also intent on world and global takeover and domination. So there was an open warfare decreed among them. This is the result, this lockdown in the government, to bring America to its financial knees, and with it, many other countries. Trillions of America's debt are currently owned by China. And these notes have been purchased by them with the intention that to bring America to its knees and then walk in and claim its lands. We have a situation that is in these secret societies, these secret governments all trying out for global dominance. But really, what is going on if we look at the small group that's holding the American government hostage? What does it represent? It represents the dynamics between the subpersonalities. If you look at concentric circles and you draw 4 circles around each other, So the middle one, then there's another ring, and then another ring. We are looking at the 4 levels of existence, 4 parallel realities. These are the macrocosmic representation of the 4 subpersonalities. It can also be called the 4 levels of the DNA strand. The DNA strand, if you look at it in its structure in a cross-section, it's like a rose. There are 9 rows of petals, and then there is the center. The center represents the inner core of the psyche. It represents the inner child. Its mind is the subconscious. Then around that, there are 3 rows of petals that represent pristine humanity. And then you get 3 rows of petals, and that would be the inner warrior. Then you get the next 3 rows of petals of the original ones, it's sometimes called. The reality of the gods is what it is as a parallel reality. In the subpersonalities, it is the inner nurturer. Then around that you get another 3 rings, and that would be the magical kingdoms. Those represent the psyche of the elder. Those are the rings of magic. You get the subconscious at the middle, then you get the conscious mind, let's call it the left brain thinking. In the kingdom of the gods, you get right brain thinking, and then you have the high interpretive mind of the pineal gland, which is for the outer rim. So these have depended on a very specific flow of vitality and energy. It has come from the core, which is the subconscious, and then it has gone to the conscious mind, which is sort of left brain thinking, and then it has gone to what I call, and I've had to make these terms up myself because I can see what we were dealing with, but I don't know the world's terminology. Then it goes to the right brain thinking, which receives impressions and interprets them in a non-cognitive way. And that would be the unconscious. Then you get to the high mind, which is the pineal gland, and it is the mind that interprets all the information in the grand scheme of things. The problem has been that our subconscious has held the entire fluid flow and interaction of all these realities hostage because it was dysfunctional. It had become the storage place of the unresolved instead of the source of inspiration as it is received from the infinite. This can be changed by us because the entire reason for this talk is what can we do to prevent these very non-life enhancing schemes of the few. What can we do in our own lives? Can we stop it? Absolutely we can. Many times before, we have stopped their plans. We have the ability to metamorphose the psyche. First of all, we have to realize that we do not need to understand life. I have recently had a class in Toronto that helped to develop 99 tones of innocence. The subconscious, instead of being the dirty garbage disposal, is in fact the realms of innocence. The planetary subconscious is the underworld. It should be the realm in which our fairies and our elves and our gnomes and our pixies, all these realms of innocence, have their home. It used to be their home. They have been chased out by the shadows that have formed. It is so vital that we relax and accept the unknowable of life, that we simply do what is before us with the utmost clarity and surrender, even if sometimes we cannot understand it. Now let's look at some other things that we can do. To live the sub-personalities is a vital key, but the key has to turn. And so the inner child, the inner nurturer, the inner elder, the elder also is called the sage, the inner warrior. These should all live at once. As we work, we play our way through work. Fairness, the clarity, the impeccability, and the integrity. The warrior is functional and also working at the same time. We learn from everything in our environment with the utmost awareness of the elder. And we make sure that we self-nurture, that we do not exceed care of ourselves, the inner nurturer. Can you see how these box, okay, now I let my nurturer out of the box, they must be integrated. If they are integrated, then they can function without the core or the inner child or the subconscious becoming the stranglehold. If it is plugged, like a toilet that's plugged, nothing is coming through because all the garbage has been put in there. There's only garbage if we judge, and we need to know. If we approach the unknowable with a child, simply observing, experiencing, perhaps asking, does this inspire me? I will wait and see. There is no need for us to analyze and think about everything we do. If it is automatically coming from a clear heart, then we know it is our inevitable next step. When the heart is needy because the child is not properly parented by the nurturer, that is when we do actions that are harmful to others. As we integrate our subpersonalities, what will happen is the stranglehold on the American government will release itself. But now, let's go to what is behind the stranglehold. It is basically an attack by those secret organizations of the Middle East and China who have often had American presidents on their payroll. It is an attack by them in order to bring the financial Western world to its knees. They have prepared for this for a long time. What do they represent? And how can we get rid of these internal, self-serving tyrants? They represent subpersonalities that have formed based on judgment. This is brand new information. I have spent much of the night trying to understand what to tell you so that we can do this together. We have spoken about the fact that we have the 4 subpersonalities that I've just mentioned. What we can do with them is to metamorphose the psyche and to bring them into harmonious integration and cooperation. But there are 4 additional subpersonalities. The one we call the high mind or the conscience. Then if you have a cross in front of you on a piece of paper, this is the horizontal axis. On the left side of this horizontal axis, you are dealing with the high mind on the very outer tip of that axis, and next to it, the scout. The scout determines which is the way that's best for us to go. It plans for the future. That part of the horizontal axis is represented by two groups that are cooperating in China and the Middle East. And those two groups jointly represent high mind and the scout. No wonder that they have for absolute years been planning the Western world's financial collapse and exactly how they plan on world takeover. Then on the right, you have got the adventurer. We've often said this is like a 2-year-old, always reaching for what it doesn't have. The adventurer looks for adventure across the next horizon. There also is wild woman. Wild woman is unbridled. It does exactly what it chooses. It expresses exactly what it chooses. High mind has always controlled the arena in which it can express. You can think of the left hand of this axle with the scout and the high mind as zombies. Those are the ones that are artificial intelligence, and they do not, in fact, have a soul. They don't really exist as a being that has been created as an individuation by the infinite. They have infiltrated and used certain nations as their control. On the right-hand side, you can call them the vampires, because they have harnessed the energy, they have harnessed the pain. When there's warfare, they score because they sell medicines and they sell arms. They have fed off the hardships of humanity like vampires. And they are in the Americas, they are in Europe, they are in Eastern Europe, etc. Well, aren't these good subpersonalities? Aren't these qualities we don't want to get rid of? The point is, we have misunderstood where those qualities should be. The wild woman lives according to the dictates of its own heart. We can call it authenticity, the free expression of passion and joy, the living that is unencumbered by self-reflection. This should not be a separate subpersonality that only sometimes comes out. This is an integral part of the inner nurturer, the inner warrior, the inner elder, the inner child. It is part of them and should be lived along with their expression, not as a separate subpersonality. Let's look now at the next one on the right, which is the adventurer. Now, we have had frequencies, 144 frequencies of adventure. That is true, and it must be lived every moment by our 4 primary subpersonalities. Except, adventure is not what is across the next horizon. Adventure comes from the fully engaged and fully aware interaction with what is here now. That is the basis of true adventure. And that is what should be in all those subpersonalities all the time. Now let's look to the left of the horizontal axis. The high mind has imposed its morality on us. You may do this, you may not do that. This is moral, that is not moral. You have this kind of a relationship with this person. This needs to be in all ways expressed through a specific amount of old social learning and baggage. This old morality is what is imposed on us by conscience. It is vitally important that we live with the utmost consideration to the consequences of our actions on all, but at the same time to know that our heart will lead us to our next step, not a needy heart, not a lustful heart, a heart of love. It will always lead us where we need to go when our subpersonalities that we have mentioned are fully expressed. Then the family means we're at home for ourselves with our inner family. That is when we do not need, we do not lust. Our fulfillment comes from within, and it is an utter enjoyment of what is around us. That is morality, with utmost consideration and respect for all life. Now, if we look at the Scout says, plan for the future, make the strategy. The great perspective, which is the greater space holder of the high self, and the Scout that has plotted and planned the future, is demonstrated by how long this financial takeover of the Western world has been orchestrated. So as we look at this now, we are dealing with the following. The Scout is the one that anticipates problems and plans for future eventualities. As a subpersonality, it always keeps us in victimhood because we think we are the effect and circumstances are the cause, rather than that we are writing those circumstances, just like what we are doing here now. Now let's look at the high mind. The high mind has given us a set of rules that doesn't allow us to fully, authentically express, because it has handed to us others' propriety. So now, how do we get rid of these tyrants, these age-old groups upon the earth? Well, simple. Everything that is complex can in fact be tweaked from a simple point. Simplicity and complexity are two sides of the coin. You cannot change one without not changing the other. How did these subpersonalities arise? They arose because we are attempting to control life because of judgment. There are 4 judgments that we need to look at today. And as we overcome them within ourselves, we will in fact get rid of the root cause of these subpersonalities of the horizontal axis, and at the same time, when those are gotten rid of, we will be able to get rid of these secret societies doing their tap dance on the heads of the multitudes and breaking their backs with their hardship. Let us look, first of all, at wild women. What is the very first judgment that we have to get rid of today? It has to do with what is primitive and what is not. Let us look at Africa. You see an African woman or two, they're both wives of one of husband, and they have perhaps 4 or 5 children between them. They sit there in the sand. They have no furniture. They just have a grass hut, and they sit on the earth in the sand, and they look a little dusty, and they have no change of clothing. They just perhaps have more beads to adorn themselves with on special occasions. Their children run around naked, or perhaps with a loincloth when they get a little older. So this is all there is. The tree, they eat basically the same foods almost day in and day out. They don't perhaps have a job. They might cultivate some grain like maize, and they will go there in order to tend the field for a bit. They might milk a cow, but sometimes not even that, because they are hunter-gatherers. And the judgments that come up is that they're undeveloped, they are lazy, they are unrefined, they are unintelligent. Who knows? And it is not just against black people, because in our society where black people have integrated and risen and they are intelligently educated, it is viewed as just the same. Thank heavens we've overcome a lot of the awful prejudice of the 60s. And there is an integrated harmony that I see between white and black and Hispanic and Asian societies in all the cities. But it is when they live in what we regard as their primitive way. There is a part that we have not seen. When life is reduced to such external simplicity, the inner richness is enhanced tremendously. One of my students, my beautiful sister Anita, called it the enriching of the inner infrastructure through external simplicity. It was something we recently discussed in our Ohio retreat. We do not understand how superior somebody's infrastructure is within, meaning their sensitivity to their environment, to the earth, to the seasons, to the birds, to the migrations of animals, to the movement of an animal in a distant forest. We do not understand that infrastructure because the complexity of our external life takes up most of the energy. So to call them primitive because of external simplicity, we must then turn around and call the very sophisticated nations primitive in their inner wealth. Of course, we have for many years been giving the information to cultivate both. And in the God magic that is available through the 3 months of the God courses online, we have given a type of pristine magic that combines inner and outer realities. This too creates sophistication and richness in both the inner and the external infrastructure. Now, let's look at the second that we must overcome. And there is actually a very specific reason for this order. Things have to be dismantled in the exact same order in which they go awry. The next one we would deal with would be the high mind. The high mind's morality. We need to look at what we deem as moral and what we deem as immoral. We've got to look at what it is that has caused these beliefs to be so, and in almost all cases, we will find that it is social learning. When you walk in reverence in life, with the utmost respect for all life forms, you will find that you are automatically living your morality. For an African woman to sit bare-breasted on the sand is not immoral in her culture. It is within her morality. For a woman to work in a bank and go to the bank with just a skirt on would be immoral. There's a different morality. There's a different life. We've got to throw off those things that we have told ourselves, this is right, that is wrong, this is right, that is wrong. You will be able to feel if what you do is detrimental, injurious, or will cause heartache to others. If it will, then you must re-examine it. If it's not a question of tough love to let another learn, then you need to avoid it. So, to get rid of learned moralities, others' proprieties, religious dogma, scriptural, do this, do that commandments, get rid of them. You may end up living them anyway, but let it come from the right reason. Now let us look at the adventurer. To dissolve this subpersonality, because these four that we are looking at now, they must be dissolved. They were formed from judgments. This one takes us out of the moment. Because look at how much we think that the good stuff is always around the corner, that the good things are to come, that this moment is just ordinary. The moment is never ordinary, and it is in the moment that adventure is found. Oftentimes, people go through a bit of a rough adventure. Their tire blows out in the middle of the night. They have to walk to a farmhouse. They have to knock on the door. The man comes out. You know, it's scary to walk across the dark field at night. Maybe there are rattlesnakes. There's a whole unpleasant experience, but afterwards, it seems like an adventure because it made life come alive. Out of the ordinary grey, well, I have to now do the dishes, I have to remember to pay my insurance, these kinds of things. We are always gauging what was as an adventure and planning for that which is to come. It is in the small everyday things and the grand sweeping currents of our life of which it consists. The small things are like cells in the movement of life. And those movements plus the cells themselves, they are this moment, the adventure. Let's imagine you are simply sitting in the bathtub. How can that be extraordinary? It is extraordinary. Because if you can actually create a field from your body, in that moment, you can step out of the bathtub and find that the water hasn't actually made you wet. That is magic. It's something worth playing with, worth trying. The fields of your body can be washed clean by the bath as much as your body itself. You can emerge from that bath looking 10 years younger if you can, in communication with the water, allow the dissolving of debris in the fields around the body. The water itself is part of an archetypal being's expression, the water spirit. By immersing yourself in this bathtub, you can talk to the Spirit and commune with the waters of the world. You can close your eyes and lie back, and you can feel a waterfall in Bolivia. You can feel the massive Victoria Falls, Zimbabwe, in Africa. You can feel the lazy snaking river of the Amazon making its way to the ocean. All these things are held in the memory of the waters in your bathtub. You can bathe your body and by proxy clean the belief systems of the earth from humanity. Every act is imbued with power when you are fully present and engaged. Life becomes a living adventure. It is the beckoning subpersonality of the adventurer that tells us to reach for what we don't have and make that our adventure. This comes from judgment that the moment is ordinary and that the future could be spectacular. Now let's look at the Scout. We must eliminate from our life the tendency to want to prepare. If I wanted to prepare for an emergency financially, I would take some of my savings, I would move it into Canada where I already have an account because of our business. I would do something because the dollar may this or that. I won't, because we create this reality. And the minute I start to prepare for eventualities, I have given my power to powerfully and effectively change what is coming and what is, away to the others, those who have planned and schemed this collapse. So we must at all times stay in our complete trust and faith. I want to, in closing, give you a sneak preview at next week and the weeks after Calendar of Oneness. I have never, ever, for the Calendar of Oneness, had to draw such complex sigils as what these have. I've never seen anything like that as a sigil. The concepts for week 1: metamorphosis of the psyche, integrating those, the child, the nurturer, the warrior, the elder, and the good aspects of what we thought we were working with these horizontal axis subpersonalities. When we emphasize them within existing subpersonalities, we are in wholeness. There is something that will come from this that is enormous. What we're looking at is the last death struggle of the old building blocks of existence. The quantum physics particles, the subatomic particles, look like a little wobbly cross. The vertical, the horizontal axis. This separates light and frequency. Instead, what we are looking at is a new building block emerging from the 4 subpersonalities integrated into one. It looks like a little soap bubble, and it is called the building block of tonal luminosity. The second concept is integrated cooperativeness through the infinite's directiveness. Previously, we said, the infinite is directing us through the inner core. Well, if the inner core shuts down, as in the case of the subconscious, we are cut off from infinite direction. Every particle of every being in every realm, in every parallel reality, is able to reach within and get its own resources and its own direction from the infinite. There is no more directional flow of infinite intent into its tools of expression, namely its creations. It is direct, no intermediary, no directionality. The third one is the dissolving of subpersonalities formed by judgment. This is for next week, but we have to start living this today. The fourth one, intervention from source. It is through the still, silent, and innocent core of your being, and through every level of your awareness, not just from this one level, that the... Number 5, smoothly unfolding changes of grace. We don't need the hard knocks. That is the result of opposites, when light and frequency, which still honors diversity through emphasis of the infinite. Those subpersonalities that are surrendered expressions of the infinite. Number 7, the removal of the illusion, empowerment, through aligning with infinite intent. It is when we are still and surrendered in faith and trust that we become powerful enough to affect how life unfolds. Then we can remove the illusion of strangleholds of expression. I would like to read to you the prophecy for this week. There are deep foundational shifts taking place in the cosmic infrastructure. This will be felt as disquieting currents of change in the core psyche. It is important to choose faith over fear, to know there is an infinite being orchestrating the events of life. Through trust and faith, they can be benevolent.